NBA playoffs have begun. Warriors are already out. They're the last dynasty the NBA had. Denver has potential to be a dynasty, but they'd have to win again this year, and they'd have to be close next year. So the Warriors have been the talk of the league and the ratings driver in the NBA for the last 10 to 12 years, and it's kind of over, sort of over. Is it over? We're not sure if it's over. Steve Kerr addressed Clay, Steph, Draymond, rebuilding the roster.
Rarely is it storybook, you know. I mean, even the 96 or 98 Bulls, you know, team was broken up and we won the championship in our last year, but there was a documentary about what a disaster the whole thing was. It's impossible for this stuff to, you know, to end perfectly. I do think there is a lot of value, in, as I just said to Tim, in you know, our three guys being Warriors for life. I really want to see all of them, you know, finish their careers here.
Yeah, I mean, that's storybook. But here's the truth about it. Go look at the last 5 years for the Warriors. You got one title. I'll get to that in a second. But 3 times you missed the playoffs in 5 years, and once you were out in the semis after the second round, right? So, and let's deep dive the championship season, because I would argue a lot went your way. You were a veteran team: Steph, Draymond, Clay, Wiggins. The redemption tour for Wiggins with one of the best coaches ever, Steve Kerr. But in round 1, you faced the Nuggets. Yeah, Jamal Murray was hurt. And Michael Porter had a torn ACL. Those weren't the Nuggets. No 2 Gs with that Nuggets team. Okay, they just weren't. No Porter, no Jamal Murray. Next round, you beat Memphis. Immature Memphis. Their best player was 22-year-old Ja Morant, who unraveled. The next round, you beat Dallas. That was 23-year-old Luka with no number 2 option, no Kyrie. Okay? And then you beat the Celtics. And it looked like first few games in that series, Boston was better, but they were kids. Tatum was 24. So you faced young Luka, young Ja, Denver without Murray or Porter, and young Jason Tatum. These guys were just not ready for prime time yet. Now the Celtics appear to be. Denver's at full strength. Forget Memphis, now OK sees the young, better team. But I think when you really step back and look at it, 5 years, they've missed the playoffs 3 times. It's hard to miss the NBA playoffs. It really is. Now, the West is better than the East. It's tough. The stars all align for the championship series. And that happens. It's not like they didn't earn the rest of them beating the very best teams at their best, but that was the run where they were facing kids and a Denver team that fell apart physically. So 4 of the 5 seasons indicate you got to have a reboot here. You can't be bringing the band back together. They're not ready for a world tour. They can give you one good night. They can give you one great night at the Sphere in Vegas. They're not a world tour anymore. They just don't have the legs. Here's Jordan with the news.
No.
Turn on the news.
This is the Herdline News.
All right, Colin, let's start in the NFL. Last time I was here, the Texans and Bills had a blockbuster trade, sending wide receiver All-Pro Stephon Diggs to Houston. Josh Allen now loses his top target from each of the last 4 seasons, and yesterday he talked about the move.
It's definitely hard to part ways with a guy that's been very instrumental in our success here over the last 4 years. And obviously, I wish we can keep everybody. You know, we've made a lot of changes this offseason, lost a lot of veteran leadership, Steph being one of them. I guess that's the nature of the business, and going into year 7 now, it's just kind of is what it is. You know, I don't get paid to make changes on the team. I get paid to be the best quarterback that I can be and try to lead the guys on this team.
Colin, Brandon Beane, the GM of the Bills, said we can still have success without a true number 1 wide receiver. Remember, Gabe Davis also gone, good player.
Yeah.
So right now, really, their top targets are Dalton Kincaid, good young tight end, and Khalil Shakir at Boise State.
Yeah, I think a star number 1 receiver is a bit overrated. So I could argue that the Randy Moss Patriot teams, that's the only group that didn't win titles.
That's true.
Right? Like, those were the great teams. I think sometimes when you have a star receiver, you know, you got to give star receivers attention and touches. I mean, the best receivers in the league right now, Devontae Adams, right now, and he's vocal. So I don't think you have to have a number one receiver. I think what you have to have is multiple receivers who are at least in the 2 space. T. Higgins, Puka Nacua, maybe a 1, but that kind of player. So I can argue if they drafted 2 receivers and they both became really solid 2s, you can win a Super Bowl. You can't, as currently constructed, get into many shootouts in the AFC. And remember, the AFC is going to be different. Aaron Rodgers back. Justin Herbert, great coach. Joe Burrow back. Aaron Rodgers back. So last year was the year. Kansas City had no offensive firepower, averaged 17 points a game in the regular season. That's all going to change. So last year was the opening. Baltimore, by the way, all their young talent, all their young receivers probably get better. So I think it's one of these things, and your receiver, running back, cornerback is a position you can draft and guys can hit immediately. Either you can run a route and get open or not. Cornerback, either you can cover a guy on the edge or you can't. So I do think what they need is production's available immediately in the draft at wide receiver and corner, but you got to hit on them.
Yeah, they picked late in the first. I wouldn't be surprised if they moved up a little bit to get another receiver. I think they're going to take 2 receivers in this class, to your point. But just for reference, Stephon Diggs, 100-plus catches, 1,100-plus yards, 8-plus TDs in each of his 4 seasons. I mean, that's all pro.
And the gap between him and Gabe Davis, substantial.
Yeah, and now he's gone.
So you really have one number 2 to 3 receiver.
Kincaid is basically a slot, a big slot.
Yep.
He's going to be really good.
Yeah,
and James Cook can catch the football in the backfield, but they need more.
Yep.
And the whole point of saying, oh, well, Mahomes lost Tyreek Hill. I love Josh Allen, but Mahomes is a unicorn. He's the best maybe we've ever seen. So I'm not ready to say that's just going to happen again. Right. Second story. NFL draft, we are less than a week away. Jim Harbaugh's Chargers hold the 5th overall pick next week. They have been viewed as a strong trade-down candidate throughout the draft process. Yesterday, their new GM, Joe Ortiz, discussed the factors that would go into such a trade.
They have to make it attractive for us to move away from those players. The whole, it's a fair trade, it's a wash. I don't think that's a trade that we're interested in. We believe we have the first pick of the draft. I know there's going to be 4 picks that go before us, but we believe that, And if 4 quarterbacks go, we believe strongly that we have the first pick of the draft. So what are teams willing to give us? Now, obviously, we know it's the 5th pick, and people are going to be trading on that, scope. But it's got to be a good value for us.
Yeah, they have taken several calls. They have yet to get, I'm told, an offer. They have taken calls. I still think Minnesota went and got the 23rd pick in the first. So I think Minnesota giving them only moving down to 11, getting another first. They would probably demand a next year first, which again, if Minnesota, which is a pretty stacked offensive roster, would give up another first, I think they'd be fine. Because that first pick usually is best served getting a great edge rusher or a quarterback.
Sure.
Otherwise, you can get a lot
Maybe a great lineman, great tackle.
Yeah, but most positions in this league, there's a lot of talent. Like quarterbacks, left tackles,
cornerstones.
Those are a lot of top 12 picks. So I think Minnesota's the team to look at.
Yeah, Joe Ortiz comes from Baltimore. Their entire organization is built really on trading back in the draft, acquiring more draft capital. They're at 5 now, the Chargers. Yeah. I wouldn't be. I'm going to throw a team out there. I wouldn't even be surprised if potentially they did business with the Jets, who are at 10, and I know want another receiver for Aaron Rodgers. Joe Douglas goes way back in Baltimore with Ortiz, so that's something to maybe watch out for. To your point, they got to be wowed to trade back. 5th pick is pretty valuable.
Denver and the Raiders may move up, but they're in the same division, so you're not going to give massive draft capital to a division rival. So it feels like Minnesota, Arizona's got 2 first-round picks, but they're above them in the draft, so they don't want to do that. So the teams that have 2 first-round picks, Chicago doesn't need to, Arizona doesn't need to, Minnesota does potentially. So if Drake May goes 3rd and New England takes a quarterback, then so I think Minnesota is going to sit there, and it's all situational. Minnesota's going to sit there and go, okay, it's one of these guys' fault. But if it goes Caleb, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and all of a sudden Minnesota's like, okay, now we're not going to mess around. We know that the Giants could take a quarterback. That we know Arizona won't. We know the Chargers don't. But I think Minnesota's just going to wait. Now, if Drake May starts falling, I think Minnesota just stays put and says, we may not have to go up to 5.
Yeah, but someone could jump them.
Potentially, but I think you sit and wait. Maybe the Giants is
Giants are. I feel like it's receiver for them. I do. If today I would say that would be my lean. It's 6.
All right.
And finally.